We did a bit of an intro on our other live stream, but we might as well do it again. We do have an extra person here today, so I guess I can go first. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did last time, which is essentially just name, which I guess Igorot organization I'm part of, and where my parents are from in the core of the areas. So, Gerald from Biwak, Vancouver, and my parents are, they're Mountain Province, but my dad, he really grew up in Apayao, and my mom grew up in Benguet. So, that's me. I'll point it to our newcomer here, Jay.
Hi there. My name is Jay Watan. I'm from San Francisco, California, born and raised. However, my parents come from Mountain Province. Both my mom and dad, well, they're originally from there, but they actually were born and raised in La Union in the Igorot migration that went into the mountain areas, kind of like further westward. And so from there, my parents came into the United States in the 1960s, and that's where my brother and I were born. We had this great opportunity over the many years to be able to learn different aspects of Igorot culture and learn the nuances of the music and the dances, but also learn a lot about the values of being in community. So, oh yeah, from BBAC of Northern California, that's the Igorot organization that I fall under. So it's been a great pleasure. It's a really deep pleasure to be here with y'all and talk story a little bit about our culture and what's happening in the world today. Thank you.
Nice, thanks, Jay. Mark?
You know. Okay. Well, I'm Jay's brother, so you already heard half of it. Yeah, our parents moved. Well, our parents' moved from the mountain province all the way down to the San Gabriel area in La Union, which is the mountain areas of Palipol and Lipay, and so there were a lot of Igorots who moved over there, and some folks would consider them Bagu people, meaning new, and yeah, even the language we spoke was kind of mixed because we were talking about this the other week, but like you can kind of hear the Igorot accent in the Ilocano. So anyways, yeah, that's where our family's from, and I'm also part of BBAC of Northern California, and also Igorot UK because I've moved from San Francisco to London, and so we're heavily involved there along with the other international organizations, the IIC and ICB, the European version of the IIC. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. I'm glad to be here, especially for a second round. Edel.
I'm Idol Matthias. Can you hear me? Because my mic was so off. Okay, I'm Idol, and I'm part of BC with Gerald. My parents are from Benguet, and my dad's from Bukod. My mom's from Batan. So yeah, Benguet, Ibaloy tribe. Do I have to talk about the backstory too? Or?
No,
do you know your full backstory? No,
I don't.
No.
Even though I grew up in the
here.
I don't, but yeah, I grew up in the Philippines. Or sorry, I was born in the Philippines. I grew up in Canada, so I'm a weird person.
What year did you move?
97. I turned 8 here, so I was born in 89. Came here in 97.
You're that 1.5 generation, man.
Yeah, which is weird because I should still know some Iboloy or at least some Ilocano, but
blame
the ESL, man. Yeah, ESL, dude.
It's all good.
ESL took it, robbed you, brother.
Exactly.
It's also my fault too. No, not very smart.
But you speak good English.
That's it. Can't even speak English though.
All right. So I think last time we dabbled in a few different topics, but I think for this one, we'll try to be a little bit more focused. I think what I want to talk about today was just the, how Igorots were portrayed. So like, well, not really, yeah, portrayed, but in terms of like the World Fair. The most famous one when you Google it is like the 1904 World Fair, and then how that ties into performances, modern performances now. Because traditionally, at least from what I know, correct me if I'm wrong, all of our dances and all those things, they were never really presentations. They were more traditions and things we did to celebrate or, do any of those. But yeah, essentially how you guys felt about those two things and how they connect. So I know I've talked to Mark about this before, but yeah. So what do you guys think
Yeah, I
about
can go on and on about this stuff. But
that? Exactly.
yeah, how about you guys first?
Go Mano. I have no opinions.
Nice.
I
You
think
want me to go over a little bit of history that I was able to cover?
yeah, once you touch base, rehash a little bit.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting. The most popular one that everybody knows about is basically the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. But the one in St. Louis was actually one of many in the United States, and really a lot of this exhibitioning started in London. Actually, there was one in 1851, and Spain brought some Filipinos over there. I couldn't find, I couldn't find information whether or not those Filipinos were where they were from and what language, either what languages they spoke, or who they were. It's because I didn't want to pay for the extra money to
For
read the
research.
paper.
You're so cheap.
You gotta pay for a whole subscription. So, anyways, but I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, it started out over there, and it was apparently it influenced a lot of other countries to start this, to kind of think about doing some type of exposition. And there was this book called The Culture of Imperial Abundance, and there was an excerpt in there that I read that was regarding how it influenced the United States, especially since they were kind of like a growing colonial power at the time. And of course, like in the 1890s, that's when they start to get the Philippines from the Spaniards, and then they get all these other countries so that they can build up their resources as an imperial power. But that exposition was kind of a part of that, and it showed the United States that like Filipinos could be used as somewhat of a commodity. And before we got online, we were kind of talking about this, but we wanted to stop talking so we can bring it to you over here and just keep on talking about that concept of commodity, in colonialism. And it's pretty interesting because like after the World's Fair, in before the World's Fair, in 1887, there was one in Madrid, and ICB, which is the IIC, it's like the International Igorot Consultation of Europe. It's mainly all the European countries with all the Igorots come together and they consult about certain things. And in I think 2007, there was a resolution that they had to talk about the Igorots that they brought over from into that World's Fair in 1887, and basically to ask about, hey, you guys haven't addressed the issue of you guys taking our people over there and displaying them as like, a human zoo. And Jose Rizal was actually kind of pissed off because that during that time period, he was actually trying to um, build put a Filipino. He wanted to have Filipinos represented, but he wanted to do something on the arts and the materials and the goods that are coming out of the Philippines. But then when they kind of basically said they kind of went, I guess they must have went behind his back and they brought in Igorot people as a way because they knew that the other things that Jose Rizal wouldn't be attractive, so they thought they would bring the wild people and apparently they justified it by saying um, the classification of these wild people go under plants and animals. So that's how they justify it. It's horrible, man. It's
Fauna.
horrible. Yeah, that's how they justified it according because indigenous people were kind of like classified under that. So they're like, yeah, we can. They're part of the plants and animals. So, and they're from the Philippines. Why can't we do this? And so Jose Rizal was pretty pissed off about that. And he actually made some interesting quotes. I think one of the quotes was like, "I would rather that they because what happened is that one of the ladies who went over there, obviously a lot of these people weren't exposed to certain diseases, and one lady who came over to Spain, one of our people, got pneumonia and died. And Jose Rizal was so pissed off, and he said, I would rather that they all get sick and die so they would suffer no more. Let the Philippines forget that her sons have been treated like this to be exhibited and ridiculed." And so that what happened in 1904 extends a little bit further back. And then once it happened in 1904, there were some other more famous expositions. In 1909, they had another one called the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exhibition. And then
Seattle,
in 1913, yeah, in Seattle. And then in 1913, they had something called the Universal Exhibition in Ghent, Belgium. And there was another person that died in Belgium. But what was really interesting is that Belgium actually named I think it was a tunnel after him or a bridge. They named it after the person, and I can't remember the guy's name. But I thought that was pretty interesting that at least they even recognized that in Belgium, and so they kind of like uh, made some type of reparation in terms of like what had happened, because I'm sure that they don't feel good about that. On the flip side of the coin, what's interesting is that Antonio Buangan, or Tony Buangan from BBEC of Northern California, he made a research paper purely based on his own need to research his own ancestry on the Sayuk Igorots who went to in 1904. And because apparently some of them were his relatives from both his mom and his dad's side. So he has this really nice, I think it's a 25-page paper. I haven't been able to read the whole thing in complete detail. I scanned over it with what time we had. And he has a lot of interesting story behind there because and from the past consultations, what I've heard is that a lot of the people who did go, they weren't exactly kind of like just innocent, and then like they wanted to explore the world, so they weren't innocent in terms of like wanting to go and see what the rest of the world was like. But of course, at the same time, I don't think many of them knew that they were being used as propaganda for the governments of those countries. And then also, well, I'm sure that they knew that they were making money off of them, but the trade-off was that they were getting paid a minimum. So I remember reading. So those other ones I talked about, the one in 1904 in the States, and then 1909. Apparently, there were different ones around the United States where they brought the rest of the Igorots who didn't go back, and then they traveled them across in different parts.
Yeah.
And the guy who was managing them, I forgot his name. He was a real tyrant, and
Yeah.
as when he wouldn't pay them properly, and even when they would ask, and it had to go down to the president to kind of like save those guys and let them go back to the country. And there was going to be one more big exposition in 1915, actually in San Francisco, but the Philippines by then at that time in 1914 had stopped the human zoos using Igorot folks. So the government in the Philippines actually stopped it, and so the no more people were sent, I believe, to San Francisco in 1915. So I think it stretches all the way. This human zoo stuff stretches in the United States at least from 1904 all the way to like 1914 or
I
something.
believe it goes up into the all the way up into the 1920s because there are people who actually remained and made it kind of like
those are the
their
ones.
job actually to
Yeah.
to do that. And so all of these things lasted till about the late 1920s.
Because
kinda crazy, yeah.
the specific one you're talking about, the one where 1915 or whatever, or the tyrant dude, he was heading a troop, right? It was it's like a circus troop essentially.
Yeah.
And he's the guy where the legends of the Dogtown, right? Louisville, Dogtown. That's where like the whole legend of where hot dogs come from, and the affiliation between the World's Fair and the town of Dogtown or something like that. That's where like the I was trying to research on where hot dogs came from because I remember someone. I think it was Gerald that told me where like Igorots actually invented hot dogs because it was named after the huts and the fact that Igorots ate dogs and whatnot. So I was trying to look up that stuff. But yeah, I came onto that like on Wikipedia. But yeah, that is an interesting story.
It is an interesting story. There was also, I think, a town. Is it a town in the same area that a high school that called their team the Igorots?
I think it still exists.
No,
actually.
really?
The high school
Yeah,
mascot.
yeah.
I think it's still exists.
Really?
Actually.
Where is that?
No way.
If you Google it someplace, it's there. Trust me. But no, they did the whole thing. They did a whole thing. I think during the IIC, when the IIC went to that area, they did a whole like Igorots performed over there. Igorots went over there and performed. I forgot which IIC it was, but it was maybe 2004 or something like that. It was way back in 2004, but like
Do you remember
when they
where?
went over
Do you remember
there,
where? Where was it? What city was it?
It was one in St. Louis.
St. Louis. Okay.
So it's in St. Louis, this high school, and basically they did some type of letter of apology and recognized that what happened was maybe using the name was derogatory in some sense, but they recognized the history. They changed the name. They changed the name of their mascot, but it's still a part of their history. And
they changed
a lot
it
of
to the
people,
Eagles now. It's
no way.
It's one in Brentwood. I think it's Brentwood High School, Missouri.
Brentwood High School.
Wow.
Oh, it was Missouri. Okay. But yeah, man, could you believe that? You know, that makes you feel
insane.
like what the Native Americans feel. It's like, oh yeah, we call ourselves the Chiefs or the Redskins and stuff, and it's like, wow, our high school name was the Igorots. What the?
Dang, I actually would have wanted that sweatshirt, right?
I was gonna say.
I mean, it's just.
And they spelled it the old way too, the Igorretes. You know that old spelling, Igorotes. But Igorots.
Really?
Never heard of that.
In the article,
That's
because the article they were talking about, like a lot of the students didn't even know what an Igorot was. They were like, "Why are we called the Igorotis? Why are we called that?" You know, they had no clue. Can you just imagine them trying to pronounce that, like during their rallies? Go Igorots! Go!
That's hilarious.
Dang,
That's like
Igorots.
that's how like some schools have their name as Spartans or whatever. No affiliation to Greece, but
Nothing.
yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I never knew that.
I know. Yeah, check it out. I'm glad you checked it up, Jay. You remember the name.
That's awesome.
Anyways, that was a little bit of.
Internet.
Oh yes, internet. The beauty of Google.
Yeah. Just did a Wikipedia check just to see if I could find it, and
Oh, there it goes. How did Dogtown get its name?
Yeah, that's what I found just now.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, it's
So
pretty
anyways,
interesting too, because
Yeah.
when I was quickly scanning one article, that was my research. Um, it yeah, it brought up the fact that yeah, they may not necessarily know what they signed up for, right? Because there was this specifically it brought up this individual from I think Congo or something like that. And, like he thought he was just gonna take care of the elephants or something. But yeah, lo and
Oh
behold,
wow.
they just showcased them just like the Igorots and stuff. And I think in that article too, they were saying it wasn't just Igorots, there was others from Philippines, but the Igorots were the
Mhm.
most popular because they
They're
were the
savage.
most yeah they were
Yeah.
the most savage and the most uncivilized, and they got
Supposedly,
them
yeah.
yeah they got them to um, what's it called, cook and eat dog every day
That must be
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
old though. Thinking about like, we're gonna eat dog again. Ah,
for
I mean, they.
Yeah,
I
I
like
know.
You think about
like
like
eat hot dogs
just
every day, man.
like really, we're gonna eat that again? Come
Like, where are the
on. I
vegetables,
want to
man?
try the hot
Where's the
dog. I want that pork sausage there. That would just get
Yeah,
too
can you give
old.
us a pig?
but
Yeah,
Christ's sake.
that's
yeah.
what they had to
Can we
show.
try that
That's
Texas barbecue? Come on. I mean,
It's just a
I
few
could eat
toes
pig.
down.
yeah,
True,
so
mean,
it's
No,
pretty
it's
interesting how
true.
they had to showcase them, and that's the only thing I was trying to bring up was just so they were showcasing Igorots like that, and then as opposed to us presenting. I mean, it's very different, but I mean, I think some people can try to pull similarities between the two,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that's really what I meant by what do you guys think about the differences and what's making our traditions as performances? How does that lie with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think you can make some parallels with it being if you know the history, because for a
Mhm.
layperson they'd see the performances and be like, oh, this is really cool. It's and for in an innocent like perspective too, it's like you're just showcasing your thing. But if for someone who may know the history, you can draw parallels towards it. And for
Mm.
me personally, I come from a camp where it is kind of a stretch to be like, oh, they're just repeating history, or we're repeat because like our guys, like I don't personally perform, but our young people, they perform at several events and
yeah.
whatnot. And for the audience who don't know even who we are, they just see it as a cool cultural thing if they know some of it. But to other people, they just see it as just a show. And then for
Right.
I think it comes to a personal view or the individual to take it how they want to. Because for me, if I were to perform, and if it was somebody who was paying me or was forcing me to perform, then I can draw the comparison to be like, this is exactly like the World's Fair. Whereas for me, if I want to just perform for BBAC, or BBAC is holding an event where they're showcasing, it's within our prerogative. It's within our own choice, right? So it's different in that sense. But I can see where you're getting at, Gerald, where you're trying to make, or you're trying to push the conversation into trying to make comparisons, which is, I think, it's a really good conversation, especially for the young people, because like even for me, I don't really know much of the history, like the full history. I just know what I've read on the internet and what I can tell. And I don't even know if my parents have an opinion on this, right? So it. I think for me, it's just it really depends on your perspective and what you think of it. So that's
So
my take on it.
back in the '90s, when I was going to college, I went to San Francisco State and took a lot of ethnic studies courses. There was a film that came out called Bontoc Eulogy by Marlon Fuentes, and
Yeah.
it highlighted the 1904 World's Fair. And even though part of the story is fictionalized, to give a connection to it, the imagery and the story and the mystery of what happened to all of these folks kind of like was really amazing. Now, one of the interesting things about that film is that he uses the films that are housed at the Smithsonian, and he repeats a lot of the film in there, for the historical film, in it. It's repeated numerous times throughout the film, almost as a way to imply that they were doing this stuff day in and day out. And it's
Mm.
pretty clever how he does it. But that film really brought about a lot of questions, and it questions the whole idea of like imperialism and its aftermath. It also questions what effect it has on the people who are viewing it and also the people who are performing it. I think for us, as we look at some film like that, that does have some fictionalized aspect to it, but it also has some truth, we're also dealing with okay, so how do we share some of the aspects of our culture to our own folks, but also share it to other people? So the question to me will be authenticity. Are we really being authentic to who we are,
Mm-hmm.
and are we sharing being authentic in how we actually not really perform, but how we present
Mm-hmm.
these kind of like rituals? Is there a sense of real or something that's real? Does it have soul? Does it still have meaning? Or is it something that we just do because hey, they're going to give our organization $500 to do it, for a nonprofit, and we could use it for a scholarship? Yeah, it's. I think we have to question that and see where the real meaning is in there. So I would say that the question would be about authenticity, and that goes across the boards because I think
Mm-hmm.
different groups and different folks and different families will offer this as a gift to the communities that they're part of. And I think to me
Right.
that's as basic as you can get with authenticity is that you're
Mm-hmm.
offering this as a gift to this wider community and also a gift to your own kids, to next
Mm-hmm.
generation. So I would.
Yeah, that.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to see more of us sharing that, but I get it. It's foreign to a lot of people. I mean, most people want to kind of like do things that are familiar, and because there's so much nuance in learning, just simply like just playing the gangsta. There's so much nuances in there, and previous generations were very guarded how they teach it, or they taught in Philippine style. So the Philippine style is
When do
you just follow,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't teach you the details. They just say listen. But if you're not from the Philippines with a good listening ear, then this stuff rides over your head, and it takes you even longer to figure it out. There's a certain nuance to how to play, how to dance these things, and so I think for what it's worth, if you're trying it out at home, wherever you are, I think that's what comes close to being authentic. Is that if it has some sort of soul in it, yeah, some sort of thing that you want to pass down. So I mean, in my room, I have a whole bag of gangsa, but
Ooh, that's a nice
do
Just
my
case.
bring
do
it with
my
you everywhere.
and I bring it
It's heavy.
everywhere. Now, not every
Seriously?
family has these things. I get it,
Mm,
and my family seems to have an overabundance of it, but
sure.
and that's by intention, I think, because there was a really a sense of wanting to learn it. I think if anything that we can do in terms of like it's just sparking some sort of interest in our young folks and in all our people to be able to share aspects of who they are. I remember the priest at my church, Father Gerlin. He used to have this quote, and it still sticks with me. Uh, he would always say, "You have to know who you are because in America, and I think this is definitely true for Igorots who are outside of our
Everywhere in the country.
everywhere in our diasporas out there. Uh, you have to know who you are, or else that other person will tell you who you are, and you might not like it. And it also becomes the gift that you share with other people. That understanding of who you are really becomes a gift.
Mm,
And so I think that that's part of our obligation is to be able to share that with others, to be able to find some sort of authenticity in the ways that we are. And I know that some people can do it, they just do it differently than other folks. I think that if we live and let live and kind of like understand, the context of how people are coming to learn this, especially now that we're a global diaspora,
mm.
I think that's what we can do to honor the legacies that we have.
Mm.
I like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a lot of ways you can look at this, and uh, I'm I don't know what camp I am in terms of, but I know in terms of authenticity. Um, I think about preservation, and I think about how can we make sure that the next generation sees this as something that's not just a stage act, but something a little bit more. Basically, what our ancestors intended for these dance rituals.
Hmm.
You know, they didn't just do these dances just for performance. There was something. There are other aspects behind it, and I've mentioned it a lot of times. Gerald's heard this before, but the biggest the biggest thing, and regardless of what dance it is, in the Cordillera, the biggest thing for me is to do your best to try and understand what was the mindset of your ancestors when they were dancing these dances. You know, so for one, like when you play the gong wasn't just an instrument that made noise. The gong has function to it. The gong is something that carries out, because before you do even play the gongs, usually there's always prayers said beforehand,
Hmm.
prayers and ritual. Constant chanting, constant, like, and everybody would take a shot to affirm the prayer.
Hmm.
Constant drinking, but like there's long amounts of prayer usually before you break out the gongs,
Hmm.
um, or at least coinciding with it.
Hmm.
So the gong's function in every area is to ring out the prayers so that they can move out and be brought out. So we don't just play the gongs just hey, that sounds cool. Of course there's an element of that because there has to be a feeling of rhythm that makes you kind of move in a certain way, right? Makes you groove. And uh, that has to be there, of course, or else it won't make your feet move. uh, but there's function behind that. When people are dancing, and they're dancing in certain, particularly in the form of the eagle, they're trying to embody the spirit of that animal. So the eagle represents uh, power. It represents amazing hunting skill. It represents that sense of the warrior and its ability to kind of like swoop around and capture its enemy. And if you look, especially the Ifuga folks do it really well. Their whole dance, like with the arm stretched out, that whole dance
Hmm.
over there, and with the weapon kind of hidden in the back. I learned it from Esposo Dul Nuan. He's from the bebop of Los Angeles, and he talked about the whole symbolism of that dance and why do they do it in a circle and everything, and that had a lot to do with uh, the eagle swooping around. And then when you watch the Ifugo dancers and they're lifting their leg and hopping, that's the
Hmm.
part when the eagle comes down and pick with the feet and grabs the fish or grabs its enemy and picks it
Right.
back up.
When it snatches it.
That bouncing, right? That bouncing is the struggle of the eagle moving up, 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 up. And other dances, like when you look at the different Kankanai dances, especially like with the Benguet folks, and also in Mountain Province, you'll see a lot of that kind of like it's a little bit of like a hop step that kind of represents that
Hmm.
sense of the eagle also flying up, and people wanted to embody that spirit. And there was a lot of different other animals that, especially like in Benguet, like they have that monkey dance, they have the frog fertility dance. There's like a lot of different dances with different animals. I know that in Ifugao they also have like alligator dance, and they're all trying
Really?
to, yeah, they're all trying to embody the spirit of certain animals. So I think what's important in terms of authenticity, um, is to kind of like research that, because one of the things that I have a little bit of a problem with is that folks these days, well, a lot of the old people who did know most of the stuff have passed away. Either that, or people don't have access to somebody who's knowledgeable. So the first place you go to,
Mhm.
as many of us do, is go to the internet, right?
YouTube. Yeah,
And so
baby.
YouTube, go to YouTube. And so the first thing that folks do is they'll see, okay, what are the coolest moves, and then they'll end up watching
Yeah.
people who had
Boogie.
choreography that were trying to imitate us, but it's a
Mm.
completely different choreography with the wrong kind of rhythms. Maybe they'll use southern rhythms, southern like you know rhythms from down south that like are completely different to ours that move you in a different way. But they'll use those rhythms, especially like in those Filipino cultural nights in the universities. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, they learn from the big dance troops that came from the Philippines, particularly the old Bayanihan dance troops and stuff. So a lot of the movements that came out of there were people trying were people who they weren't Igorot, but like they were imitating us. So a lot of them didn't actually refer to Igorots at that time because of whatever stigmas they had towards real Igorots. So they just kind of
Mm.
like made up their own dances. And the problem is that like when some Igorots who don't have any resources to learn, they'll go on YouTube, watch these dances, and then they'll include it in their choreography. And it's like, wow, we're doing the imitation of the people who are imitating us or trying to. And I know I can always see it when I see it in certain moves, and it kind of like it's like watching that feeling when someone scratches the chalkboard. It makes you go, oh damn, okay, somebody was watching YouTube, like in somebody's Filipino cultural night, And so I just think, particularly for us Igorots, we have to just do our best to try and uh, speak to as many elders who know and all those folks who have embedded themselves in traditional indigenous dance, and especially particularly Igorot dances, and try their best to learn from them. Versus, I mean, okay, if your only resource is YouTube, then it is what it is. I get it, but I guess that's why we're having this discussion so that people can just double check. No, it's kind of like, hey, I want to get this tattoo, and someone someone puts on a tattoo with Chinese lettering on their arm, and that Chinese they were told that Chinese lettering means like warrior or something, but it really means something else, like stupid or do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
like you gotta
Ariana Grande had that same thing.
what? She really did?
Yeah, she got noodles or something. She got like a Japanese tattoo, but it said noodles or something like that. Yeah.
So particularly from our own people, we don't want that to happen to us. So you just got to do your
Oh
best to
man.
kind of like try and find out at least as much as you can. But the first thing that everybody can do
Mm-hmm.
is at least try and think about the mindset. Think about what your ancestors were thinking about. I feel like I'm always preaching about this, but I think it's really important because yes, we may perform because we want to represent our culture not only to ourselves but to other fellow Filipinos, so that they know that we know our culture is alive, and but we also
Mm-hmm.
want to represent it to the outside world with a feeling of connectedness, not down to the step or the choreography, but to the feeling. Does that make any sense? Because there's a feeling when you dance. The feeling should have something behind it. It shouldn't just be about, okay, on step 8 I move here, or okay, I'm doing this all in rhythm count of 8. The way our dances work where we're from is that all the dances are very simple, and that's for a reason, because the principles behind the dance are the ability to be able to, one, check the timing and spacing between you and your partner next to you, and to be able to play in a call and response. So if I play bung, then somebody plays bung. They're always doing a call and response in the music. If we can keep those principles, I think that and understand those principles behind that dance, and understand the beauty and the simplicity of it, then I think that the next generation has a chance of making sure that the tradition is not just something on a stage.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right. I hear that. The issue that I also think that we have is that it looks simple, and yet it it's really not. Once you get into the polyrhythms,
Yeah.
that's not simple stuff anymore. And and when you get into that sync, when you actually play and you hear the polyrhythm happening, it's quite beautiful. It's really amazing because you could hear all of these things happening, but it only happens when everyone does it together. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
They
that
know what they're doing.
sometimes it used to be in when you used back in the '90s when we used to like talk about, hey, I want some gongs and stuff like that to play. Our relatives in the Philippines say, why you want that? Yeah, and they would be asking, and all of a sudden they started seeing us folks in America play this stuff, and then all the other folks around the world playing this because we were trying to make some connection back to that place that we call home, right? And then all of a sudden there was this massive revival of music and dancing, and you can see it now in the schools in the Philippines. It's massive now. Like they have big old dance offs now. It looks like it's in massive festivals, and they make up their own dances now, and I guess that's authentic now. But it's there is a movement out there for people to share that. But I think for us, sometimes we discount that which looks simple as being something that is not worthy, and yet in
Yeah.
that simplicity, there's a lot of complexity in it. And that's why I think it's actually hard to pick up because even though
Yep.
it looks simple, like initially when I was a kid, I thought, why are they banging a bunch of pots and pans, things that look like pots? And actually, literally, they were because we didn't have the instruments yet. People actually, I remember the Wandog family or something like that. They had some instruments originally instruments that they were bringing over. Some were authentic, but then when they were sharing it in the BVAC of LA, some were literally made out of like old pans and pots. And eventually, as people started making this together, they
Whatever you
started
get
claiming
back
this
then, yeah.
back, reclaiming this cultural aspect of ours. People started bringing like the authentically made stuff, the stuff that's made out of brass and the materials that would be resonant. But in order for some of us to make these instruments back in the 80s, people were literally grabbing their pots and pans and remelting them so that they could create an instrument. It was pretty amazing what was happening just to reconnect with one's culture, and then share that with others. But there was a huge movement back in those days to reclaim, and I remember very much so that there was a lot of conversations. I could hear the elders. They were trying to piece together what they remember over the years, how to put all of these sounds and rhythms together. And even then, when we were practicing for our kanyals, they would have these conversations about how to recreate the thing that they remember in their memory.
The interesting part was a lot of that would be arguments because people wouldn't realize that, like, from like say for example, Eastern Bontok plays a little bit differently than Western
big time,
Bontok
yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
Yeah.
between speeds and so people were just like, even now, like during the IIC that I went to in Hawaii, man, there everybody wanted to do the takik, right? But of course,
we couldn't get in sync,
everybody
right?
played it differently. It took about 20 minutes for that to even like to move forward because they're like, no, do it like this. No, do it like
Yeah,
this.
we had to
Oh.
agree on the regional sound. We really
That's
did
what
have
was
to agree.
happening?
So that's what I mean by the complexity of this thing, and that it
I
looks
remember-
simple,
yeah.
but it's really deeply complex, and we're still inventing. Uh, and then I think there's got to be room for that kind of like invention in there. Which,
Yeah. I
which-
mean, I'm don't get me wrong with authenticity. Like I feel that like innovation is fine, you know, like innovation is fine, but it's just like you gotta if you're going for a source, you just have to double check your sources if you can. Double check your sources if you can.
Yeah, because
And
you
still-
start seeing. Yeah, because you start seeing
Yeah,
like
yeah.
even for our younger people, you start hearing a mixture of
Mhm.
of like the different sounds. because I know when I remember when they were trying to learn how to do the Bendian, there was a mixture of how like the Kankanai would interpret it with like how what I was told how the Bendian was supposed to play, and there was just it was not so much confusion, but it was like a mixture of like a culture within a culture kind of thing. It was really interesting.
And
Those
it's
guys know what
really,
they're
it
doing.
will be authentic to the people in Canada, in your region too. So that's what I think would be that's what makes it quite special.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
true. I think
Yeah,
that's
I
one
mean,
of the
what's so
most. That's one of the
Sorry,
most.
go ahead.
Thanks. That's one of the most interesting but frustrating things about all the nuances, and I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
people realize that there are so many little minor differences between how everybody performs, and a lot of times they think it's their way is the right way. So, uh,
Especially
yeah,
the older
it's
generation.
yeah, it's interesting to see how everybody else does it as well. So I think if we could just be mindful about that, I don't think there'll be
Yeah.
any issues. But
The
obviously,
most mindful thing is the part to be really mindful is that if you're gonna play it a certain way, it's gonna make your feet move a certain way. So
Mm.
it should make your feet move a certain way. Does that make sense? Don't try to
Mm.
fit like this other type of footwork into this type of sound. Is what I'm saying. You know, because if you listen to the beat and the groove, it should move your feet a certain way. It should lift your feet up a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Like the difference between like versus like do you hear the slight differences? That'll make your feet move a certain way.
Right,
It'll make your
right.
knees bounce in a
You
certain
you
way.
you'd be hopping in that first one, and the second one
Yeah.
you'd be swaying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't sway in the other one and you don't hop in the other one, right? It's kind of like that's why people start doing just the choreography without recognizing that no, actually that's even if you're doing that choreography, it means you're not listening to the gong.
Mm,
You know, a
mm.
lot of times there's signals in the gong. So like if you hear in the Ifugal dances, like when you hear there's a signal when to turn. Bang 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 but for like first it'll be like it'll go like that, it'll run, and then somebody will usually create a hand signal to turn. Bang bang bang. Then everybody will like do the paya, they'll put their arms out and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll go back to the beat, bang bang bang. Then they go back to that one, and that's the signal to go. Those are the things that the dancer should be vibing with and connecting with the people who are playing. If you're just doing it by count step, like if you're just doing it by okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, turn, 1, 2, 3. If you're doing that, then it kind of like the dance kind of loses its soul, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
at least how we dance our traditional dances. You're kind of missing something, and it's the connection between the instrument and you, along with the people next to you. So I think if you keep those things in mind, um, then people can, the next generation is going to be all right, even if they innovate, even if they innovate. And the
Yeah.
other aspect I was talking about is like, I don't know, you might not be Christian or not believe in prayer, but there should be some type of, I don't know. My personal belief is that there is some type of intention or prayer or mindfulness practice that's connected with these dances.
Well, there's a
And even if you do it for performance, you should always have that in your heart and in your mind. If you don't have those aspects, then it just goes back to just being stage performance.
Mm.
well, there's often this invocation, which is a kind of like a prayer that invites the assistance of higher power, of God, and of spirit. And it's an invitation that invites all of that has made you who you are, and all of creation to be part of this kind of act. I think that
You don't have to.
there is a spiritual that the spiritual depth sometimes is missing in the actions that we do, and sometimes it gets muddled down in the fact that, hey, I believe in a certain way, or I don't believe anything at all, and I and so, but definitely there's the aspect of spirit, the aspect of
Yeah.
of the religious aspect that comes with our dances. That's a real thing, and I think that
Yeah, whether it be animistic, you know, or you don't have to be. It's not just a Christian thing. It's it's a I don't know. I don't want to use just coin the generic term spirituality, right? What would you
right.
call it?
I mean, if you come from a Christian
Prayer is
context, then
universal.
it does have a certain aspect of it. And coming from the tradition that at least I come from, which is from the Anglican tradition, we have a very broad way of looking at how we pray. So the invocation invites the Creator, the Spirit, the ancestors, the
Mm.
Christ, to be with us in this time. We invite the ancestors, and we invite the sense of the wider being of community, to be together with us. Remember when we would celebrate these kanyaos, and it would be offered as this blessing to anyone who'd come there, but also the blessing to the world, almost, when we offered those kanyaos. And there was something really, really nice about that. People always came home feeling good, but also feeling quite blessed to be a part of something like that. Those are some of the aspects I miss. I mean, especially when we're talking about like being now in this COVID-19 quarantine situation that we're
Yeah.
in, and the first thing I did was rebuild my backyard so that we could play the gangsta in the back. But I just have myself right now, and sometimes my son who will come out and play, but it still feels incomplete because it's just two sounds. But I think that when we have the opportunity to gather again, uh, it will be a great opportunity for our communities to really celebrate and be together. I think that people will cherish that a little bit more, at least for the time being. They will celebrate us when we have the opportunity to come back again. Um, which then leads us back to I think another question, because we have so many of our people who are in the medical field and care providers. A lot of Igorots. I mean, that's how we became a diaspora. Either they joined the U.S. military or something, or they became nurse, or they
Mm.
became some sort of like healthcare professional out there somewhere. I mean, that's a lot of us are in that boat, and so uh, just think about kind of like, hey, we have a lot of our people who are like first responders in all of this. They're the heroes in the front lines of this COVID-19 fight that we're going through right now. So I'd just like to
Yeah.
give that up to them, and say a big blessing and prayer to all of our folks around the world who are contributing uh, to the betterment of our society, and also helping those who need help. Let's hold them our prayers that they continue to remain healthy and 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 strong in this.
Right on. The old people right now would pour some tapoy, some rice wine, and everybody would take a round.
I have coffee. I have coffee
I have
here.
coffee.
I also have
Yeah,
coffee.
yeah. So
Hey,
I think this
Pour,
is
did
a
it.
pour,
top.
pour
Oh,
one.
hey, I see some top boy right there.
There you
I
go.
think that's
Oh, nice
true.
one.
Oh, he's actually going to get it. Okay.
He's actually gonna.
Share, dude.
Hey Gerald, sorry, I hope I didn't like interrupt your train of thought. It's
Hey,
like
right
sometimes I
there,
keep
right
on.
there.
Oh, that's close enough. That's fine.
That's close enough. So I pour this out for all of our people. This is the closest I have to Top Boy right now, and I hope that you share some of that stuff at home
Touch
too.
and throw.
Woo!
Hey, right from the bottle. Is that legal?
I love it.
Can we do that in the broadcast?
Yeah, why not? It's from Canada.
Hey, it's to affirm that prayer, right? To affirm that prayer.
Woo!
That's right. I know. I was going to ask about the
That
prayers because
authenticated it.
because yeah, with the chanting, I mean, I don't understand half of the things people are saying. So, like you were saying, so it is asking for blessings and including everybody in that type of thing.
Hey, what did your father-in-law,
Yeah.
Mark? What did your father-in-law say about like the saying blessing and chanting? Because I remember he said something about it a while back.
He has a reluctance to teach it necessarily because at first when we first heard that back in the IIC, because he remember originally he said, I'm not going to teach that to anybody. But what he really meant by that was that he wanted you, because if you want to pray, you have to have the heart to pray.
Mm.
And you have to have, if you want to learn, you have to go and have the motivation, self-motivation, and want to be able to learn how to do it. If someone just gives it to you, it's easy to throw away. So like my martial art teacher always says stuff about things that have value. A lot of times people will get a diamond, they'll see it in their hand, they just think it's a piece of glass, and then they throw it away. So I think that's kind of like what my father-in-law's reasoning for that when he said that back in the IIC. It's like, I'm not going to teach that to anybody. It's because no one really taught it to him. The only way that he was able to learn it was he had to just be there and be present. So one, prayer is part of being present, is being present. And you have to be self-motivated to learn. But he also said at the same time, he said, we of course we have certain structures and prayers that we do, but because you're not here, of course you can make up your own, right? And so like as long as the heart is there and the intention is there, and that you really kind of put yourself into that prayer, then he says it's legit, you know. That's it. That was his thing about it. And from what I've learned from the and observed from the old folks who have talked to me about prayer, it's a lot of it is there are certain traditional melodies that they have, and a lot of it is a call and response. It's just like the gangsa. So someone will call out the prayer in a certain melody, and then people will repeat that melody in some form, either as like a version of like an hallelujah or an amen, to that. And so if you can understand the basic principles, and this goes with the music and the dance as well. If you can understand the basic principles, then you can have a little bit of innovation to bring it forward. Back like Jay and I, the way that we do things sometimes is like we have to modify because we don't know all the different rituals, but then we know the basic principles. And so like before certain performances for the young folks that we did in the past, we always tried to like, you know, the whole thing's like you're supposed to at least butcher chicken and stuff like that. So sometimes the old guys will have they'll make tinikpikan beforehand, so that's part of it, right? And then like you should always do some type of prayer before you set off to dance. And then like usually at the end of a dance, I don't see this that much anymore, but the old people used to do it all the time when we would have our gatherings. Like right at the end of the dance, someone would feel the spirit, and at the end of the dance, or like somewhere in the middle, they'll do a prayer, and they're just like come up there and just start talking about the blessings of everybody and stuff like that. And then like everybody will come and they're just you know they'll start firing the gongs again, you know. And they just keep on playing to make sure that prayer keeps on being pushed forward. So those are the elements I think that should be put back in, so that there's a sense of spirituality. Because it's for me, what I've learned from the older folks and what I've learned just in general from the rituals I've been a part of, one being my wedding when we did the dawak, like you know, like it's important to have those elements, or else you just it's important to have those elements. And I think that if you can just somehow like pass that on,
No, I agree
I don't
with
know.
you. So one of the things I want to point out here is that you always share, and so someone might be wondering, how come he just took a swig without like actually sharing? And then you put something aside for your ancestors and for the spirits. And
True,
you put
true.
that there for them so that when they come and visit you, when they come and visit you, then it's there for them. And so
Yeah, they always have
I
to have
leave it out
something.
there.
One of the old ladies a long time ago, we had this, because like back when my grandmother was still alive, all the old ladies would come over. They'd be talking to like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And one of these times when it was pretty late, my brother and I were there, and I was really young. Jay probably remembers it more, but like sometimes these old ladies would, I don't know, they get into a
They
trance
get possessed,
and
yeah.
they get possessed by the ancestors. And so I know this sounds kind of crazy, but like this old lady, she stood up and started, and literally her voice started to change a little bit. She started speaking more like a man, and apparently it was my grandmother's father, and he was saying, "How come you have not left any food for us? How come you have not left anything for us? We've come to visit, and there's nothing here." And that was like kind of freaky, man. Especially never seen that before, you know. And so ever since then, that was probably the impetus for my parents to also start making sure that we learned the culture as much as we could. And it was also the impetus for us to make sure that we reconnected with the other Igorots around. This was like in
Mm.
the 80s, I think, right, Jay? Bebop was
Yeah.
made in the 90s. Our
Well,
bebop was made in the
Our BBAC was founded in 1990, but there was already a lot of gatherings. But this was about probably mid 80s, and I remember how the grandma spoke, and she stood up and started pointing. I'm like, oh man! And she started, her
90s.
voice changed, and after that, it was kind of like a wake up call, like, whoa, okay, all right, then those are things that we should pursue.
I remember growing
And
up, I'd hear stories like that too, like
mm,
especially like from what I remember in the Philippines. Even when we moved here, I'd still hear my dad talk stories about that stuff, like all
Mm.
these like spiritual stuff. Like for me, I'm not very spiritual, but I understand what you mean when you talk about like um, you have to feel your ancestors because I like that's where I think where authenticity comes from, and
mhm.
obviously that's where it comes from. But if you look at it from more of a worldly, practical sense, like if you try to put yourself in, like when you actually feel the music, when you feel like you belong uh, in that
Yeah.
group, that's when you start like like I'm not very good at playing gongs or whatever, but if I were to be part of like say Bendian and everything's going fluidly, that's what that's what I feel like when I'm in the midst of my ancestors. That's how I interpret it as. But
Yeah.
what I find
Yeah.
for me, what I find interesting is like I remember back when I was younger, I'd go to my mom's house when where she grew up in Batan, and all the old
Mm,
women, specifically the old women, they do the chanting. Like an old
Mm.
man would, one of the elders would like say, um, like what's it? He'll say something, and then yeah, the old woman would reply back with like a
Oh,
chant type thing,
yes. Yes.
and that was that. Like I remember specifically experiencing that a lot when I was younger, but right when I came back like last year, I remember what's it called? A lot of the aunties back there they didn't want to join because they're very like they're super Christian. Like from my family, they're very
mm,
like
Mm.
they're very Protestant Baptist. So
mhm.
anything that is like in like anything that is very what's the word uh
Pagan
basically anything
sounding.
that's pagan. Exactly, I was
Hmm.
trying to say like Igorot, but yeah, pagan, anything pagan they will not participate in. So like a lot
Hmm.
of the
Mm.
even our history, like I barely know it, barely know anything, because especially when my parents like converted to Baptist, it's all about like God Christian in church,
Yeah,
which is cool,
yeah.
right? Which is why I think it's really special that Jay is part of this because you're a priest, right? So what I would look forward to was your perspective and the differences between paganism and Christianity in the context of our Igorot culture, and because it was really interesting to me because when we were trying to do a kanyao in Batan, where my mom's from, like
Hmm.
yeah, her relatives didn't want to come
Mm.
because they didn't want to participate in the tayao where like they had to they had to pray first and then the butcher like they didn't want to be part of that.
Right,
If they were gonna do the tayao, they weren't gonna come. So what happened? And because we were supposed to be doing a full blown like kanya like not kanya but what's it called? But yeah, so it was gonna be this huge thing, but they decided to do the prayer like early and butcher the pigs early. That way, the relatives can come, and that way the aunties would feel comfortable participating in the merriment or
Mhm.
whatever. So I thought that was really interesting because, like, from 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 my experience, most of the older folk have become like Christianized, like anti-pagan type thing. So it's interesting how from my perspective, it's like me and Gerald have always talked about this now, or like talked about this how it's usually our generation that's like way more interested in this stuff. And if we do have questions,
Right.
we do talk to our aunties and uncles or mom and dads and stuff, and they'll answer the questions. Like even now, I'll ask my mom about stuff in the past, and she'll answer. But there's a difference with that versus things being handed down compared to how we imagine the experience of our culture is how things are handed down by word of mouth and stuff, right? Things are handed down. That's how our culture has preserved,
Right.
and it's interesting how our from my experience growing up, there really isn't that in that sense. So I don't know. Like for
At
me,
least not
spirituality
here,
is
right?
something else.
Not here.
Yeah, no, especially not here. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to know too, like learning of how our culture is growing back home, right?
Mm.
There's also that not disconnect, but there's also that parallel like experience that is different from how I grew up and how I might have grown up back home and stuff. So I've always thought
Right.
about that sort of stuff. It's kind of
Can I just say
very
something
interesting.
before you say something, Jay?
Yeah. So I
Before I
think
forget it.
I grew up. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what I think was interesting because you were talking about like, oh, how they do it in the Philippines, and I just wanted to talk about my in-laws because my in-laws, my father-in-law, he's the one that helps lead prayers these days, but
Mhm.
he's also like big into the Episcopal Church. So even though he's Christian, he's still helping to lead these so-called like pagan rituals. And what from my in-laws' perspective, uh, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
They believe that blessings are blessings and prayers are prayers, and why not try to get blessings from every aspect that you can? Why not? We have both traditions. We can celebrate both. There's nothing wrong with that. So receive the blessings from both sides. And we spoke to this Hindu lady, and we were talking about they invited us to the hospital to do Christmas caroling with them. And then my wife was like, "You guys sing Christmas carols?" She goes, "Of course we do. We believe in all kinds of gods." So in like the Hindu religion, they have gods from every level, like
Yeah.
God of war,
Yeah.
God of love, they have different gods. And they just believe, like, yeah, Jesus is a god. Why can't we celebrate him too? So they're like all inclusive, man. So when we went to they were the ones who invited us to sing Christmas carols in the hospital, and just their outlook was very similar to kind of like how my in-laws feel about it too. It's like, yeah, we're Christian, but we also believe in the old traditions as well. But again, there are
So
a lot of people who, yeah, sorry.
So it's in a way you're it's accommodating to worldviews, right? Or
Yes,
Well, it doesn't
perspectives.
really see it as separate, and that's one of the things. It sees it as part of the whole. And coming from the Episcopal or the Anglican tradition, one of the things is that it's not really a dogmatic church. What we do believe essentially is in the in the God's great love and in the power of the Christ to transform us, and we see that Christ manifested in Jesus Christ, in
Mhm.
Jesus. However, there's so many ways, so many aspects in which we don't understand fully about God, but we know that people have lived lives of deep faith and deep meaning for many, many years, and that people only seem to be stuck on the semantic ends of what it means to be connected to this great divine. So as human beings, yeah, we could say that my way is the right way, but yet we are so greatly diverse that we have to find what we have in common. And so
Mm.
essentially to to practice some of the some of our indigenous rituals, it's really only an aspect of the whole. If as long as we don't see it as a dualism,
Mm.
sometimes we get stuck in thinking,
Mhm.
oh, hey, there's one way, or and that's another way, and yet why can't there be more than one right answer? Well, maybe perhaps that's what we're really looking at is the wholeness of 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 existence, and that's kind of like a big concept to try to grasp.
Yeah.
I don't expect everyone to buy into that. I don't expect everyone to say, yeah, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I think that as we look at the wholeness of who we are, to me, the Christian faith is quite wonderful, and has taught me a lot about what's right in the world and what's life giving in the world.
Mhm.
And so I'm not going to lose that, but at the same time, I also know that there's many deep aspects of our indigenous culture and indigenous faith that whoa, there's a deep understanding of something that of my ancestors, of my connection, that is a spiritual thing. Spirituality is that connection to unconditional love. And if we could live into that more, well, yeah, I think the world would be a better place. It would heal us more too. But sometimes healing the divisions, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So uh, I would say that if you could find it as part of the whole, you'll probably find what's right about it. But if that's something you struggle with, then some people, as I know some people do, and they can only see it as one way.
Yeah.
Um, well, those are the choices that they make to live into the fullness of who they are. Um,
Yeah,
And they're
and that
losing something in that sense too,
I think
right?
so.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
so. I think you
Yeah,
definitely miss
because
out.
yeah, because my like I have not seen these aunties in not since I left for Canada, and because of their hardened stance on something, they're like I'm
Mm,
gonna lose the experience with them. They're gonna lose the experience with me and whatnot, right? So
right.
like to me, like practically is just being hard headed. And then for me, if you want to talk about spirituality, you're just you're losing. It's a lose situation because at the end of the day, even you do take like a hard stance on something, you're still like you're still pushing people away. That kind of thing. That's the way I saw it. You're just pushing us away just because like for me it was an important part of my trip because like it's something I get to experience authenticity being back home and whatnot, something that
mm,
I
Right.
can't have
yeah.
here, right? Because it's back home, and yet they're trying to be like they're trying to move away from the traditions or whatever, which is to me is just like weird. Like what the hell? Like I'm out here living in Canada trying to preserve my culture, whereas over there you're trying to like ignore it, and it's just I don't know. To me, they like
Yeah.
I personally think it'd be an interesting like experience to like get to know them, to see their point of view. But to me, it's just kind of like it was just kind of whack. Like, what the hell? Why, man?
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
very dogmatic, like you
That's
said. It's just so weird.
that's a tough one, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but we've seen that like even back in in San Francisco, we've seen that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why usually, and it's really interesting because some folks will participate in the dances, but because they reconcile they might be Christian who also believes the same as your aunties. They don't want anything to do with the paganism,
Yeah.
but they will do the dances
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they separate the spirituality and they just see it just as performance.
Mm.
That's just kind of like keeping it on the stage, right?
Mm.
And like
Mm.
and so that's how I've seen some of them reconcile their way of still trying to dance by just keeping it as performance for themselves, so they
Mm.
don't feel like they're doing any pagan practices.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. For me, man, like
But
I
it's
like what
hard
you
to
mentioned
live
there.
in that dualism. I think that's a hard thing to do, to live in that kind of dualism, because then you're saying that there's a part of me that really I don't want to be,
Mm.
and
Exactly. Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's I think that creates other issues that might come out in some other way. But look, who are we to judge? I think with your relatives, love
No,
them
exactly, exactly.
as
I
much
want
as you
to.
can.
See,
Yeah.
that was my thing. That like I want to. I still love them, but the thing is, I don't know who they were. That's the funny thing,
Mm.
because like who I don't know
Yeah.
who was who
Yeah,
was
you go
supposed to
back
come
thinking,
and
hey,
whatnot.
this is the place, and
Yeah, yeah,
teach me, and you're teaching me something that I could find on evangelical TV.
yeah.
I could watch Joel
Exactly,
Osteen for
exactly,
that. Probably
exactly.
Joel Osteen's probably a little bit light. They're probably a little bit more hardcore. You know.
Yeah, they're probably a glacier.
Ooh, my lord,
All
my
right,
lord.
let's move away from
Yeah,
religion,
let's move on. Let's move on.
can we edit that?
politics, religion.
I don't know if we can edit that
Well,
here, but
religion.
Yeah.
Well, religion. It's that's why at first when I was kind of talking about prayer, I was kind of like, oh, part of me was like kind of holding back because I didn't want to say the wrong words. But okay,
Mm.
let's face it, man. Spirituality is huge in our culture, and it's huge in the dances.
Yeah. Even like again,
Obviously,
even for
prayer is
me, like
prayer.
yeah, for me, like I don't dig in the whole spirituality thing, but like even when I do see a prayer, like I remember, like cause it when I see an Igorot prayer or whatever, because it's something that I've experienced when I was younger. Um,
Mm,
Me being non-spiritual or whatever, it still resonates to me, which is quite weird because like for me, like I don't go to church anymore and whatnot, but it's interesting that there's still that aspect of spirituality where I can sort of
right, right.
like
Hmm.
accept and whatnot. So it's a very that's why to me culture is so important because
Mm,
like
Hmm.
I'm just without it I'd just be another guy or whatever, which is fine, but like
yeah, yeah.
Well,
is
I
that
I
something that I
think,
would accept? Yeah.
yeah, there's a deep religious aspect within the culture that, of course, we lose over because it's it has evolved because we've moved away.
Like
There's
headhunting.
folks of us like who have moved away,
Yeah.
and so it doesn't hold its framework. But the religion itself is quite important. It doesn't matter how deeply religious you are or how deeply spiritual you are, but what it does is that it creates communities, and
Mm-hmm.
it creates, well, communities of faith. And so if you look at like North America, or where you have a lot of different churches, and each one of these churches actually is part of civil society. So you think about like, hey, how did this work within the context of our culture back in the day? Well, because we were practicing these kind of rituals where people were gathering together, it was almost like that was church for them. And when you don't have that, or you don't have that semblance of like a faith community,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have things that teach you how to behave. You don't have thing that reminds you of what you belong to, and so not having all those things, what else do you have? These are definitely strong aspects of civil society, being part of like of a community or a faith community. And so, of course, now that we're not, we were separated away. Our cultural organizations, our BBACs, and that actually forms part of like the aspect of civil society that reminds us about who we are, what we belong to. how to treat one another. It gives us rules and guidelines for ethics and how to be in this world. And and there's a lot of study that goes that just simply being part of like these kind of like communities um, is what holds things together. Uh, it holds things together on such a deep level. So when you look at the breakdown of civil society anywhere in North America, anywhere in Europe, anywhere in the world, you'll notice that if the faith communities are at their weakest points, that's when the culture starts breaking down. That's when you don't have much civil society. And then a lot of arguments can be said that, oh yeah, the religion brings out a lot of war and stuff. Actually, that's actually a misnomer. I think that it actually has brought about a lot more different consciousness, and it's changed the way human beings have thought about each other. It has challenged us to accept, this great diversity and to love each other more. But of course, you don't have to listen to that, and you could follow some
Well,
other
people
message.
misinterpret it.
Yeah, for sure.
People misinterpret it. Speaking, because again, back to when you mentioned when you were dancing the Bedouin, and like how you felt, man, like this is the real deal. I'm feeling my culture here, and also going back to that concept of where semantics are involved, and when you use that term God, sometimes just using that term God is just a reference to something else, a feeling.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
feeling, and so
Yeah.
when we go back to the dances, that feeling of, for me, like what God is that feeling of connection, you know, connection to the rhythm, connection to people, connection to the community, connection, and everybody moving together in some type of rhythm, either together in unison or together in some type of rhythm where we're creating like multiple waves, and like it's like if you get past the semantics, if you talk about the thing that's greater than us, I think that's what it is. And I think that's one of the things you want to aim for when in when you're dancing or playing the instrument. Like if you're playing the instrument, the gangsa, you're trying to make sure you're connecting to the dancers. If you're the dancer, you should be trying to connect to the instruments. If I'm the dancer, I should be trying to make sure my spacing is a certain spacing with the person in front of me and behind me. Oh, if they move in, okay, let's compress here. If we move out, so there's like a language that you have that's unspoken, and I think that's another like way to facilitate and cultivate that sense of connection. When we were like late teens, um, uh, one of the elders in our community, Mr. Galas, was teaching us how to dance the takik, and we were just, man, there was just this, and I still remember to this day, there was this mode, this feeling like where we were just dancing. We danced until like the middle of the night. I don't know how the neighbors felt about that, but it was that point where no one wanted to stop, and we just kept on playing and dancing and dancing and dancing like for like hours until the sweat is just like all over you and just peering at your clothes and God, I still remember that moment to this day, and I'm like 40 something, and but it was such a amazing connected moment, and that moment is when that connection is something that goes beyond that sense of linear time. That sense of linear time, because like when we think of linear time, like, oh, our ancestors died at this year and we're alive in this year and we will die in the future at that year. No, when you play the gangsa, you're connected to your ancestors automatically. When you think of them and play, when you dance, you're connecting to your ancestors, and that's like, it's almost like a circle, it's cyclic. It's no longer linear
It's a
anymore.
gong.
So that feeling that you had when you played and the rhythm was right and you were in groove, you were in harmony in the dance step with everybody.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about right there.
I
Don't
think
get
to an
confused by the
outsider,
semantics.
yeah, to
Yeah.
an outsider, like them hearing this, if like connecting to your ancestors or whatever. It's so like foreign. But I remember like one of my Insta stories, Amber Aranka. She even was it Amber or I think it was probably Erica, where she because like it was a video of one of the bebop practices, and my caption was like, "Oh yeah, like the feel the beat." When you hear the gongs. But even she was like, "Yo, dude, like it's true. Like, it's hard for someone who's someone outside to get it, but like because we grew up with hearing the gongs, like this is all very like scientific and stuff because it's been part of our childhood. When we hear it, especially when we're older, it becomes this nostalgic like thing where it like I do believe that like it can definitely connect us to our ancestors because like when I hear the gong, it's like this this feeling of connectedness is the best way I can put it. And basically Erica like agreed with it. She messaged back. She's like, yeah, it's like that. Like, yeah, it's weird. No
Well,
one
we do
else
have
could feel that.
the
Yeah.
Christian tradition has this idea of like communion of saints, of being part of something of a whole. It has also the idea of being part of the body of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And Christ not necessarily just frozen in the image of Jesus, but actually the living embodiment of God's intention for us to be God's great love in the world. And that's what that Christ is. That Christ has always existed, and then it becomes manifested in Jesus Christ, and you have that archetypical narrative
Mm-hmm.
that's quite life-giving. But when you think about it, you really are very much connected. Yet you're also very independent. You make your own choices. You're not bound by necessarily. And I think this is why a lot of our own relatives decided to move. They weren't bound by, hey, I grew up in the Philippines. Yeah, hey, they had this great sense of adventure to move to another place. Yeah, one for necessity, but I think going back to our story about like the Igorots who signed up to go to these World's Fairs, there was a deep sense of adventure amongst them
I
for
think
them
so.
to volunteer
Wonder.
for that, and I think that that's something that for us we have too, is this great sense of like wonder and adventure and
Mm-hmm.
wanting to create something
Yeah.
that will be different. And part of it is that you want a better life, you want to live that kind of dream, but the other thing is that you don't necessarily want your life to be ordinary or boring.
I
You
think
want
that's part of the reason why our ancestors revered the eagle so much, revered birds. It's in all our dances, the tayo, right? Flying, because the birds can go anywhere they want. We're just a modern manifestation of what our ancestors were thinking, leaving the country, but still wandering and still being who we are. So there's still that sense, and I tried to convey that in IIC. I don't know if it got across, and I've tried to convey that in a lot of the workshops. That sense of what our ancestors like latching on to that, and trying to embody the eagle. But at the same time, here we are traveling. Our parents traveled from one place to another, and still, even our kids and us, we're still going to be moving and going from place to place, just like that eagle. And
That's a great imagery,
I,
and because it also symbolizes this freedom thing that we
yeah,
hold so dear. And so you think about like how fierce our ancestors were. We have all of these great narratives about like how we fought off Spanish colonization for 400 years, right? And we defended our land and our well-being. And that's part of the narrative that many of us grew up to.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think about how much we value freedom, and most people, I think, not just Igorot people, but most people, for sure,
yeah.
freedom is such a high value for us. We're talking about like the capacity to be able to live into, a great connection, a great love. That requires a great degree of freedom, to be able to make choices, not have someone necessarily tell us what to do. They could simply advise us, but we make our lives, and that's something that I think is greatly valued amongst our people.
Hmm.
Hey, are we good on
the first
time? What's our time here?
We're it's pretty long, but that's
Oh
Is
my
okay.
it?
lord! All right.
Gerald's got the best
Yeah.
mic. Man. Let him talk.
No, no.
Yeah, sorry,
Hey, what are
brother.
you using? I see that mic out there, and it looks. What is that mic?
It's a Blue Yeti.
Ah,
A
Yeah,
Blue
Blue
Yeti.
Yeti.
yeah. It's just a USB mic.
It's really good though.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sound pretty
Yeah,
good.
super clear.
Yeah, no,
Right?
He's got. I
I didn't want to interject too much. I liked how this was going. So,
Yeah,
but
it's funny.
It's awesome though. Like you had the like
The best audio.
yeah, the best one, man. And the best camera too. Because when I saw the recording, I was like, "Oh my god, my Wi-Fi sucks."
Bro.
it's all good, man.
Same.
The audio comes through well, so it's totally
Oh,
fine.
that's
Yeah,
excellent. Excellent.
Even just because it is about an hour and a half or so. I just want to sum up a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
Yeah, I think the two biggest concepts I heard and liked about our conversation here was authenticity, of obviously, and mindset. So in terms of just performances or our performances now, those are the two biggest things that have to go into it. So I think um, another another thing that was brought up about performances was external people won't necessarily understand what's going on or don't really get the context, the things that we're feeling. So when we are performing, I think it seems like it is best that we have some sort of narrative as we perform, whether
right.
we're chanting
Mm-hmm.
or performing dances and doing the movements, all of those. I think now, it's just really important that to get those messages across, because if we are performing, yes, we can be doing it for ourselves, but if it is the end goal is cultural preservation and awareness, we should be providing that narrative so that external people can understand what
Mhm.
we're going through
Right,
and what
right.
we're feeling and why we're doing all this. So
I
those,
have to say that like in the times that we have, when we perform, at least when I'm involved, I really do my best to explain the things I've been mentioning here, especially when we do like group participation and we talk about so that they'll have the mindset so they can connect. Because I think when we represent ourselves, it's not merely just about here, look, this is us just doing the dance. When you represent yourself, you should try to find ways because the whole principle is to connect, right? So you try to find ways for the audience to connect with you. So by helping them to understand the mindset of what's going on, especially if they do participate, and I've had many people, non-Igorots, and including Filipinos, who've come up to me and said, I've seen these dances so many times from your community, and you're the first person to ever explain it. And I just want to say thank you so much because now I get it. I totally get it. I didn't know there was so much meaning behind what you guys were doing. I just thought you were just doing like a conga line, I didn't know. Now when I join in, I get it. I get it when I join in. I, I'm not joking. Then, like, I've had a lot of people coming to me afterwards, and it reminded me of all the times I have performed especially when I was younger, and I didn't feel
Mm-hmm.
moved to be able to explain things, either because of I was still young and they didn't understand stuff. But like, I just think about all the audience who didn't really know what was going on, and I like it that you're wrapping things up with mentioning that, Gerald.
yeah, it's true because yeah, I don't know. This might be something we'll talk about in a different episode or podcast. But yeah, the reason I mention that is because of other groups, let's say, or other people performing our dances and stuff like that, and what are the
Yeah,
differences
God, that's
between
another one.
us? Yeah, I know. What are the differences
Yeah.
between us doing these performances and the other groups? Like, yeah, we have our background. So if we are trying to really promote awareness and really preserve our culture, we need that deeper understanding, and we have to be able to tell other people what is going on. And I think, like you said, they would really appreciate that.
Mm.
And yeah, it really differentiates us from those other people. So
Yeah, like when I get comments from people, other Filipinos who tell me like, I didn't know you guys still practice your beliefs. I thought you guys just have country music.
That's so true. What's our
You know what I'm
national
saying?
anthem? Country Roads?
It's like,
Oh man.
yeah, man. Like, and I have to say, oh God, it makes me go like, do one of these, like pump the forehead kind of thing, and it's just like, ah, man. Of course, we love country music. Our families love country music because of its expression and its storytelling. But it's no, we still practice and we're still alive as a culture. So yeah.
exactly.
What's interesting is what I've encountered is people romanticizing our
Mm.
culture,
Mm,
and
mm,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I've come like I've come across people that like literally saying like you're Igorot. I'll be like yeah, full blooded man, but they're like you don't look like
Yeah, yeah.
Igorot and stuff, and so like people have this romantic idea of like what an Igorot is, and then when they if they ever go to Baguio and they'd be like what's these are what Igorots are. So it's interesting that people aren't aware, and I've if it just became aware to me of how there's the concept of like traditional Igorot or whatever, and there's in the Igorot diaspora, us we're different from
Mm.
what
mm.
the ideal of an Igorot is, and then when you go back home, there are these like Torogi guys, going around with their Levi's and leather jackets with cowboy hats, and it's like that's also Igorot too. Like to me, that's
That's
also
also Igorot.
Igorot.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yes.
yeah.
it's so interesting, like discussing these things because again, like if I encounter someone who don't know what Igorots are and are interested, they're not aware about this stuff. Like I'm not aware about this stuff. So it's
We're
funny.
all
It's
learning.
interesting.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, it is.
we definitely are, for
It's
sure.
true.
Yeah.
It's true. So just we can keep talking after this, but I just want to end the stream so it's not too much or too long or
Right,
too
Who
right.
cares?
overwhelming.
It's
But
good for the YouTube algorithm, man.
but
All right, enjoy.
before we leave, I do have
Go
one
for it.
question. Your favorite dance or performance, Jay?
Wow. Favorite dance
So
has
something
got to
that
be
you
balangbang, because that's where our that's where our relatives are from. That's where we're from, and it has a slow kind of movement to it. You're not hopping anything. You're kind of like you're you're brooding over something. You're getting ready, and
Mm.
there's a certain solemnity to it that's a little bit different than the other dances that I quite revere. And when you do learn it, and the patterns, of course, it sounds like it's just a call and response, but yet it 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 when you hear it in a line, when the players are in sync, oh, it's quite, it does have a certain reverence to it that it just makes, it gives you goosebumps.
Mm.
nice. I like that, Mark.
Yeah, that's a hard one, man, because there's so many. I love them all.
It's true.
Um, because when you're talking about bang bang, it's cool because I was talking to one of the older folks over here in the UK, and one of the older Igorots, and he was talking about how actually the balangbang, it's known as a victory dance, but the psychological function of the balangbang is to clear the mind. Because when you come back from war, it's kind of a way to prevent PTSD. And so, like, uh, part of it is when you come back, playing the gangsta helps to
Mm.
kind of clear the mind, calm the spirit, and that's why in some places they play it fast. Some places they usually play it fast to prepare, and they come back they play it slow. So there's kind of different functions for the balangbang in how it helps the warrior spirit to kind of calm itself, because geez, after you come back and I don't know, maybe you've had to chop a head off, or if you come back from war, let's say, think about those people from World War II. A lot of them had to do a sense of cleansing, because then some folks, it's just too shocking to the mind and the spirit sometimes. But okay, that was just an explanation about balangbang and why it's such an awesome.
It's not your
awesome
favorite.
dance. Well,
What's your real favorite? Come on.
There's one of many. I have to say, one of the ones I've learned to come to love is the Benjin dance. Because I remember one of the older ladies, and I won't name her name. She said, "Oh, that's the most boring dance because it's just people dancing in a circle. It goes round and round, And I thought about that.
Oh
Was
man.
it Jokoi? Sounded like Jokoi.
Huh?
Sounded like Jokoi.
Kind of. I won't name the name, but it just when I heard that, it made me go, "What are you talking about, man?" So of course I studied a little bit, and what I love is that, like, especially with the modern movement of the Benguet folks, they're trying to preserve more and more, especially the young folks now. And when they really do that dance, like everybody, because if you listen to the drum beat, it's so the concept of that dance is that it's the sound of a heartbeat. Lub dub, lub dub, lub dub. So when you dance it, everybody should be in rhythm with the heartbeat. So there's a sense of unity there, like everybody being on the beat and the footwork being on the beat with that, so that everybody's in one mind and one thinking. And that dance was originally done well, there's many reasons why it was done, but like one of them is it was for sickness, for people who are sick, so they would do that dance. And part of the dance is about endurance. So like you basically, the whole function of the dance is you stay in as long as you can, and you try to endure as long as you can. And it's I've grown to love that dance. Man, I do love them all. Like learning about the Ifugao dances and Kalinga. Kalinga is one of the first dances. That whole set of Kalinga dances are one of the first ones that we learned as young folks, along with the Ifugao dances. But then, Mountain Province dances, dances from Abra, Pirate Man. They're all great. Sorry, that was such a wash, man. Sorry.
Love it, Vito.
For
yeah,
me,
I just love it.
I'd have to say the Tupaya is by far my favorite because Kalinga, it's the most energetic. It's fun, and like the boogie is very popular. But I personally think that like the Kalinga, the Tupaya is way more cool. But it's funny that you say you like the Bendian, because I used to hate the Bendian growing up, because it was like Gerald used to say, like, my mom loves the Bendian. She actually walked by. What the heck? But like yeah, because my mom loved it so much, I'd be like, what the, like, what? And I used to think that too, like, it's so boring. You just round in a circle, same rhythm, same beat. But again, like what you said, that's all very true. Like the heart, the rhythm, the heart, and whatnot. And like exactly, and the fact that it's like a community thing, that's really cool too. And and the more I learned about it, how like now it's like they'll say that it's like a ritual dance for the harvest or whatever, but it actually used to be a victory dance during headhunting. And when I was like a teenager, I always thought, like, man, the Iboloys are always so, like, they're the farmers compared to like the Kalinga and the what's it called Bontok. They're always like the warriors and whatnot. So I've always thought the Iboloys were kind of like boring, whatever. But like, yeah, it used to be a victory dance after successful headhunting, and it involved in like the whole community, and it's called a what did you say again? What's it called? The
Dance of Endurance.
Endurance, yeah, the dance of endurance, because it used to go for days. And
Days, like
and
7
when we do it,
days. Yeah.
yeah, and when I remember when we used to do it in bebop and stuff, it's always like the last one, the last dance. So to me, it's boring. It's it marked the end of the night or whatever. But it's when I learned
We
that
can
it
get
was
everybody in, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The older people would force you to do it. I'd be like, oh crap, whatever. But the endurance dance, for days and whatnot. And to me, that's pretty gangster. But yeah, like for me,
Yeah.
it would be the Tupoya, but definitely Bendian, hands down for me, because that's where my mom's from.
Just to connect a little bit to what you said, the reason I said it was a dance of because originally, sometimes when people were sick,
Mhm.
that was usually a symbol of like, oh, somebody from the neighboring tribe is trying to put something on us, some
Yeah,
juju. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So then that's when they'll go on the head hunting trip to appease the spirit.
yeah.
So to connect what you're saying, it's usually because then they would do it afterwards.
Yeah,
I remember the feedback of LA did a whole thing on it, which is when was the
Mm.
Amon? That was like in the mid '90s or something.
Probably 95, somewhere around there, 94.
95. Yeah, man. We went to the Amon that they had in Bebak of LA, and they did this really great. They did like these different suites from every province, and then they explained the story, the original story of the Benjin, and that was one of the things that I learned from there. But yeah, it was used as a victory, like kind of a victory post
Headhunt.
headhunting,
Yeah.
headhunting for the reason that somebody was sick because somebody was putting curse on them.
So weird. Yeah, this guy's got
Oh,
COVID-19. We gotta kill somebody. Like, what?
Dude, can you imagine? We all got COVID. We better go kill those people next door. It must be them.
Oh man,
Like, what the?
hell no.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
What
crazy.
about you, Gerald?
Yeah, it's okay. In terms of performing, the Balang Bang for nostalgic reasons.
Yeah.
Like I can't. Yeah, I just that's it. But in terms of actually watching the performance, the One Dogs doing the Torayan, so
Ryan, exactly. Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
fun. Like it's so interesting. And then seeing it at I think IC in Hawaii was the first time I saw it.
Same.
And
No,
it
like
was
a good.
my mind was blown. Like it was crazy. Just
Yeah. Then the music. Yeah.
yeah, the Kalinga dances have just so much energy, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that, like, in terms of performances, and people modifying our dances and doing our dances and changing it up. I mean, they want that energy. They want that.
Exactly.
I don't know. They want to be able to put on a show as opposed to
Yeah.
the boring balang bang or the boring Bendian. Like, yeah, but it's.
But I think the aspects of those things come from the point of view of a person being a bystander.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that Benjin, and most of our dances, they're really meant to be communal. You're supposed to join into that thing, and that's what I think people lose. They call it boring because they're not participating. They're
Right.
just like viewers. They're waiting to be entertained.
Exactly.
But no, this ain't the Coliseum. This ain't Gladiator. What you really are, you're being invited to be a participant, and that's what makes it meaningful, I think.
Right. It's true. That's true. But
Yes.
yeah, those I see definitely was really interesting because some of those dances I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Do you have
It was
any of that on video?
We do.
We do. I don't know about long chunks though.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure people were recording on their phones and stuff. But I don't know who.
Yeah, I
don't
think there's
remember.
quite a lot on the IIC website. I think not
there?
the Facebook website.
Facebook group. Yeah, the Facebook
Right.
group. Like, there's tons.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, we're gonna sign out of the stream here. Thank you everybody who wasn't watching. I don't think many people are watching.
Well, they can watch the replay.
Anyway, they can watch the
Yeah.
replay. So, all right. Thanks for joining us, and we'll
Thanks,
see you next
everybody.
time. Where I'm not
Thank
really
you.
sure what we're going to talk about. Should we go into appropriation?
Politics. Let's
or
talk about
are we-
politics.
No, I don't want to talk about politics.
Well, we can talk about
Appropriation's
I like
pretty bad enough. So,
subject. Yeah.
but,
I like that subject though, but like, what's the difference between what we do and other people doing what we do? You know?
Absolutely.
I
do
mean,
like that.
we could always segue into different
Cultural
things.
appropriation. Wow. All right. All right.
Well,
I'm gonna have to get a beer, bro.
we'll,
Get
we'll
another
see.
beer.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.